was the summer of 2014, and for my son's bar mitzvah present, just like many Jewish parents, we wanted him to bond with the Holy Land. Oh, it worked perhaps too well. My husband had stayed back at the hotel, and our friends, my son and I, had just stopped in a pharmacy.
Run to the bomb shelter, sweetie. Please hurry. I didn't hear the sirens at first, but the Israelis did. They're used to hearing these things. We ran to the back of the storeroom. It was a 12-foot by 24-foot windowless bomb shelter. My heart's pounding. Boom! Boom! I hear it and feel the percussion of the exploding bombs. I'm trying not to get sick. I look at my 13-year-old son and I think I'll never forgive myself if something happens to him.
That's an excerpt from a speech I gave to the Orange County Jewish Bar Association. It was the first, but not the last time we had to run to a bomb shelter. Our adventure and my transformation is also the subject of my book, Blasted from Complacency, A Journey from Terror to Transformation in Israel. There is no chapter in a parenting book on what to do when a war starts and you're on a family vacation. Think touring extraordinary and sacred sites mixed with cowering in bomb shelters. I'm still trying to get over the Jewish guilt of taking my son to war for his bar mitzvah present. The impact of being human targets helped me understand the plight of Israelis living like this, and it also made me want to work on peace. How Israel is often described on the news is not what I'd seen with my own eyes. And I felt Palestinian parents also preferred their children playing safely in their backyards. The missiles exploded just near enough to blow apart my world as I knew it, forever changing me. And you'd never recognize my life today with what it was like then. I believe I found my life's purpose. The impact of the war made me want to work on peace of all types, and especially between Israelis and Palestinians. I know that the parents on both sides want their children to play safely in their backyards. The greatest disservice the media has done is to convince the world that there never will be peace in the Middle East. Yet there are pockets of peace even today during war. At Peace with Penny, we have a packed library of interviews of peace organizations whose members are often both Israeli and Palestinian who work together on peace, some for decades. The ways of working on peace are varied and include science, medicine, interfaith, transportation, sports, art, music, environmental conservation, and many more. Is it harder during war? Of course, and many of these peace organizations believe working together now is even more important than ever. Producing Peace with Penny for the last 4 years has been a joy. It's positive, gives an added voice to the peacemakers, and importantly provides hope. It's like a breath of fresh air in a Gazan tunnel. But there's another simultaneous reality that I felt couldn't be ignored. And I've been writing for the Times of Israel blogs now for over a year. With the Israel-Hamas war lasting 19 months and escalating, and only a slither of hope that the end of the war is in sight, watching the peace negotiations bounce around more than an NBA basketball, the hostages are still not home. And anti-Semitism is again at historic levels. There's much to write about. Additionally, so much is currently happening almost simultaneously. We just honored those taken from us on Yom HaShoah, the holiday commemorating those we lost during the Holocaust, decades of terrorism, and of course, October 7th. We also can't ignore the deaths and destruction in Gaza. Folks, these aren't numbers. They're babies cooing and gap-toothed kids, grandma's hugs, and graduations forever missed. Hate is a disease that destroys the perpetrator before their intended target. Please stop yourself from jumping to, but if X didn't do Y, these are humans, and we shouldn't be treating each other this way. War is extremely painful and ineffective. If you weren't able to catch the 20th Israeli-Palestinian joint memorial ceremony that has been commemorating the lives of so many lost on both sides for years, organized by Combatants for Peace and the Parent Circle Families Forum, I wanted to stop and take a couple minutes and play for you a video of what happens in Israel where the whole country stops wherever they are and honors the fallen. Sorry, I know it's jarring, but I think it's the least we can do. But let's get to today's interview. Admittedly, although Peace with Penny concentrates primarily on peace between Israelis and Palestinians, this time we're concentrating on the Jewish side of things. And for a peace podcast where I interview peace organizations who work together from both the Israeli and Palestinian side, let's just say it feels a bit awkward. I'm going to be talking with an American Israeli representative named Itamar Harari, who hopes to be chosen to be part of the World Zionist Congress this year. We'll be explaining in detail about who the World Zionist Organization and the World Zionist Congress is and why it's important for every Jew not only to understand, but also be aware that your voice is needed and you are allowed and requested to vote. Please vote by May 4th, and we'll talk about why it's important. Yes, the World Zionist Organization is the same organization that helped to found Israel. If you're Palestinian, the very thought of talking about this organization may trigger some bad feelings. Please take a deep breath. I believe that it's important for every Arab, Palestinian, and Gazan who's listening not to automatically jump off the call. In peace work, we have to set aside our own egos and listen. Your ego will want to fight you on this because she wants to tell her side of the story, but you have to know where the other side is coming from. Try to question what you may have always been told all your life and listen to what rings true. We're not here to change your mind about anything. I believe no matter what your beliefs have been, you will probably discover something and maybe even a bit of light of understanding. That doesn't mean I think you'll necessarily agree, but for your own benefit, you need to understand the other side. So let's get started. Itamar Harari is a clinical quality analyst. Dr. Harari earned a doctoral degree in educational leadership and organization from the University of California, Santa Barbara in 2005. He has been leading evaluation of projects across multiple disciplines, including health services, education, and delinquency prevention and intervention programs for over 20 years. Dr. Harari joined the AltaMed Health Services team as the clinical quality analyst in May 2022. Prior to his employment with AltaMed, he was the director of quality improvement for Radiant Health, working with Ryan White Part A and Part B grants. Dr. Harari is currently a member of the Orange County HIV Planning Council and the HIV Quality Management Committee. Hello, Itamar. Welcome.
Hello, Penny. Good to see you.
Same here. So let's get going. I wanted to start by talking about the basics of for instance, what is
This
World
Congress,
Zionist Organization?
the Zionist organization, actually, it used to be called the Zionist Organization. That was established in 1897 by Theodor Herzl. He was the visionary, and it was a supreme organization of the Zionist movement at the time. And the work of the Zionist organization was really to start to settle Jewish people in more Jewish people in Israel. So the settlement piece was really important piece for the Zionist movement at the time, determining that the Jewish people had to have their own independent state in order to have self-determination, in order to have self-identity. That was a time of the emancipation. That was a time when all the ethnic groups were seeking their own independence, Serbs and Jews and Muslims alike in different parts of the world. So this was Jewish people also knew that they had the linkage to Zion, what was called Zion even before that. It wasn't, they didn't create the word Zion. This was basically in the Bible, and the Zion was always there. I would say Palestinian Jews were living in Zion throughout the years. The word Palestine turned by Romans back in when Roman Empire was ruling. So anyone who lived in that area was considered Palestinian. So the Palestinians were both Arabs and Jews who lived in that land. And then when Zionist organization started again in 1897 by Theodor Herzl and his other co-founders, their goal was to move more Jewish people who had no place, who were feeling persecuted mostly in Europe, in some other parts of the world, to the place where they call Zion, because they understood that needed to be a place where Jewish people have their own land. They didn't want to take the whole area of Zion or the whole area of Palestine. They wanted to just establish a Jewish state and to have a coexistence with its Arab neighbors. That was the idea. That was the vision from the beginning. When they began this process, the Zionist movement really moved into Palestine in different waves, beginning of the late 1800s and then beginning of 1900s. And when they settled in areas like Tel Aviv, Petah Tikva, Haifa, and many of the kibbutzes in Galilee or in other areas, they lived in peaceful neighborhood coexistence with the Arab neighbors. There was a peaceful coexistence. There was actually very limited. Sometimes, of course, there was tension, but overall, both sides live in peace with one another.
What is the World Zionist Congress compared to the World Zionist Organization?
From the beginning, the Congress was part of the Zionist organization. The Congress was where the decisions were made. It was the parliament of the organization. From the beginning, they had delegates from around the world. They would be meeting once a year. At that time, it was mostly in Europe. Before World War II, before World War I, and after World War I, and then after World War II, they started meeting mostly in Israel, when Israel was established. But the Congress was the parliament body for the Zionist organization. And the idea was that it would be a democratic process that represent Jewish people from around the world. So they created a system where it's about 38%. When Israel was established, it became very clear the way they wanted it to be is that the majority of the delegates would come from Israel, the state of Israel. So there was about 38% of the 500 delegates. The other majority was U.S., had about 29%, and then the rest of the world had 33%. So because U.S. was the largest Jewish population outside of Israel at the time, it was considered to be really important to have enough delegates coming from the U.S. That's the way it was established. And after the establishment of the State of Israel, the Congress would be meeting less frequently, and then eventually it would have meetings every 5 years, because its task was much more limited. They basically wanted to relinquish much of the responsibility to the state of Israel, to the Knesset, to the Israeli parliament. And they wanted to, out of consideration and respect, and the fact that Israel had a sovereign state. And so the work of the World Zionist Organization, the World Zionist Congress, was really to oversee the work of several agencies still in existence, and they're very big agencies that are being supported by the World Zionist Organization.
Alrighty. Now we have this vote going on since March 10th through. It's just got a few days left. And can you talk about who can vote?
Yes, any Jewish person who is in the U.S., who resides in the U.S., who is 18 and older, it can vote. And they also need to sign that they're in agreement with the establishment of the Israel as an independent state, and they agree with Zionism in terms of the Zionist movement, its ideology, the Jerusalem program, which is really about having Jewish. This is like the idea of immigration, Israel, a Jewish state, having the education piece, advancing Jewish, Hebrew, and Zionist education. So other things like supporting settlement and development in Israel was really an important piece back then, and it is still important now. And the idea of settlement is really merely to develop Israel as a Jewish state, of course, with coexistence with its other minority populations, including the Arabs and other minorities, Christians, Muslims, Arabs, as considered, of course, there could be Arab Muslim or Christians, and of course, Druze and other minority groups who may be also part of the country. And they also have the free, as long as they are citizens, they have the right to vote. They have the right to move, and they have to establish their own home in the state of Israel, and the same as anyone else. Same right.
When it says under practical Zionism supporting settlement and development in Israel, they are not talking about what has come to be settlements, for instance, in the West Bank. Could you clarify that a little bit more?
Settlement is a general term for in Hebrew it's called ityeshvut. What it means is to develop a piece of land, to make it into a place where an inhabitant piece of land where you can create a town, create a village, and live and raise a family. That's what it means when you look at the word settlement. It's pretty much probably not the kind of like dictionary definition, but it is a very much practical definition of settlement. Unfortunately, nowadays it becomes very political, the word. So there's a lot of weight on it. And no, it doesn't mean only development in Judea and Samaria, but it does mean also there's some money will go towards Judean areas. There's been a consensus in Israel that they need to stay part of the Jewish state, such as, for example, Gush Etzion. If you ask most Israelis and most Jewish people, they would agree that Gush Etzion is an established, it was historically part of Israel, the Jewish community, and should continue this way, as well as some other areas. We have Ariel and other areas that really established themselves, and there is a consensus. There will not be at any point in time negotiation for their evacuation, for giving it back, that land. So settlement, when you're talking about development, it also means really helping those communities, not just communities in the center of Israel, but also communities in Gush Etzion, in Ariel, and some other areas nearby.
What are some of the organizations involved with the WZO?
We have the largest organizations, the Jewish Agency or Sochnut, Jewish Agency for Israel. We call it Jaffe here. That's the major one, and that's actually where initially, before Israel was established, Ben Gurion, who was Israel's first prime minister, was the first president and chairman of the Jewish Agency. And the Jewish Agency at the time was really the agency that was in charge of governing the Jewish people in Israel. So they had a really important role. And so Jewish Agency until today has a really important role as NGO that has oversight of a lot of different functions in Israel. Then there's also the Jewish National Fund, or Keren HaKayemet L'Israel. That's another big organization, and historically has a lot of big role in terms of managing land and taking care of forests in Israel and other areas. And also having educational part. There's a lot of educational aspect for the JNF. There is, in addition to it, you have Hadassah, International Zionist Organization, or WZO, Bnei B'rith, Maccabi. These are all kinds of World Union of Jewish Students. Those are smaller organizations, but still are being supported by the World Zionist Organization. And then you also have other departments, a part of the World Zionist Organization that have a really important role, such as there is a development department that they're in charge of, again, the issue of like a settlement piece. When you talked about the settlement, is identifying like funding, for where funding goes toward infrastructure development and so forth. So, for example, just if we can skip, our Slate 8 coalition wants to make sure that this department prioritize a great deal of its funds to rebuild areas in the north and the south that were heavily damaged and to the terrorist attack They destroyed so many of those places, towns, kibbutzes like Be'eri, Gaza, and so forth. So we really want that department will focus their attention right now in the next 5 years to really rebuild that area and well to really do it really quick. It has to be really quickly so those members of those areas could actually those towns can go back and live in that.
Okay. Wanted to talk a little bit more about the World Zionist Congress. They are in charge of a heck of a lot of money, $5 billion.
Let me explain it further. It's a World Zionist organization, and the World Zionist Congress that oversees the World Zionist organization has a total allocation of funds that they've decided, and that based on what they have a great deal of funds in the reserves that over the last 100 years that's been invested, and that money. So they allocate the money on a yearly basis. Each year, it's about $1.5 billion a year that is allocated to all those organizations that we just listed. So that's about $1.5 billion a year goes to those organizations that then those organizations implement their work to those funds, do their work and the operation actually is being supported by those funds. That comes to a total of about $5 billion in 5 years. So yeah, actually less, more than.
In 2020, last time that they voted, 124,000 Jews in the US voted out of 7 million possible, which is only less than 2%. Why so few?
Issue majority of the Jewish people, including myself, I would say, don't know enough about the World Zionist organization and its function. I knew growing up that historically this organization was very important, of course, before Israel's establishment, but I didn't know, I had no awareness of it. That was my ignorance, and many of us, that
Yeah, I'll
that
sign up for that.
the organization is still alive and kicking and doing a lot of work and there's a lot of money that they allocate. I didn't even know that. Just in 2020, I there was my first time that I voted because someone asked me to vote. Even then, I didn't know that it wasn't a really important organization. I thought it was more like a symbolic kind of gesture for the Theodore Herzl. And so just right before March, actually it was, I think it was around January of this year, or maybe towards the end of 2024, when Jonathan, the chairman of our Slate, reached out to me because they heard about me and asked me if I could join the campaign. And it explained to me what this is all about. And I was shocked to hear, the function and everything else. So I said, of course, it's important and I understand the need. And that's when I became aware. So the answer to your question, I think the majority of the Jews still don't know. There is higher awareness now. This election actually dramatically increased their awareness. And we foresee that the numbers will be much, much higher than the numbers, the voters in 2020. And we do have some issues now with, unfortunately, some fraud that was found.
Right.
But and that's a
We'll
really,
get
really
into
big
that.
unfortunate. We'll get into it, okay? But yes, we're looking at a large number of voters now, a large percentage of voters.
Do you have any idea? We're talking about billions of dollars, and there's a gap in logic if you need the votes. It doesn't make sense why there all this time there hasn't been more of a
Yeah.
push other than recently to get the word out.
Yeah, it's a good point. I can only surmise, and we both of us can only surmise the reason. I'm sure there's some reasons, and I don't want to misspeak and badmouth anyone before knowing exact reasons, but I'm hoping for the best intention for everyone, and I hope it was just only because of some kind of oversight and stuff like that. Something that it wasn't really intentional, but I think.
Doesn't make
Yeah,
sense.
that doesn't really make sense. I agree.
Okay, so there's 2,900 candidates that are hoping to be voted in, as I understand it. That's a lot of folks.
2,900, but if you look at the number of slates, that's probably better representation.
Last time there were 7, now there are 22.
22. Yeah, we
Do
have
you know
22.
why the jump?
The jump happened because of current events. I think we've had, really unfortunately, because of the October 7th attack, massacre, the war in Israel, anti-Semitism that have reason around the world and especially in the US. And I think the younger generation now that is felt it on their own on
Yeah.
campuses in Colombia, and even
Yeah.
you see Santa Barbara,
Yeah.
UCLA, you see
Everywhere.
Berkeley, of course,
It's
everywhere.
everywhere.
I'm sure that had a huge impact on everyone's understanding of the need to be more involved and to take care of their own future, to do their best to really be more involved, including myself. You know,
Yeah.
I felt the need to do it, and I'm sure that that's kind of, if you ask anyone who is a part of any slate, they would say that similar. So that's what led to that kind of increase in the slates. And I think it's
Hmm.
also kind of like the joke, the Jewish joke. You know, you go to an island and there are two Jews, and you find out that there are three, four synagogues, and you know,
Hmm.
everyone has their
Yeah.
own opinion and they want to
That
express
would
their
be
opinion.
true. Well,
So,
speaking of what's important to us, I had to put it in here that the World Zionist Organization requires that at least 40% of the delegates are women and that a quarter are under age 35. I thought that was really interesting
yeah,
when I
that's
saw
great.
that.
That's fantastic.
So here we go with points that you haven't mentioned yet here
I think we kind
that
of
you
went
feel.
over.
So I did put in the top agencies who do get money, the biggest being the Jewish Agency for Israel. Did you want to talk
Mhm.
about them more? Of course, the World Zionist Organization's in there. What
Certainly.
is the organization in Hebrew above?
Oh, חטיבה
Yeah,
להתיישבות. Okay, that's the
exactly.
yeah.
My Hebrew school from being a kid, I can read that, but I don't know
Oh,
what it means.
fantastic. Yeah. You can read the Torah, but you don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I have no
most of the
idea what
Jewish,
it's saying.
most of the American Jews who learned, of course, but you're
Yeah,
among the few who actually can read. That's amazing.
yeah.
That's really amazing. So חטיבה להתיישבות, התיישבות is settlement, and חטיבה is the department.
Mm.
So Department of Settlement. חטיבה להתיישבות. So what it says is that the Department of Settlement they received 1.2 billion shekel would be $300 million or something like that.
Mm, mm.
$400 million. That's how much money they received. Yeah, JNF, קק"ל, או קרן
Yeah.
הקיימת לישראל, receives a little bit less. Keren HaYesod, which is United Israel Appeal. That's another organization we didn't discuss before. It's another organization that also receives a great deal of the funds.
Mm,
And they also responsible for several of those kind of programs also outside of Israel, the connection between Israel and the diaspora Jews and
mm.
so forth. Yeah, each one of them has a really important role, plays a really important role in the Jewish world and in Israel.
Okay. And let's talk about those votes. A lot of
Yeah.
articles lately about that.
We've heard a lot about, in media, and there's a lot of information on that. I just wanted to just clarify. A great deal of the slates are Orthodox slates, Orthodox Jewish, meaning affiliated with the more orthodoxy in terms of
Okay.
their denomination. Those organizations, some of them are ultra-Orthodox
Mm,
organizations or slates, like Am Yisrael Chai, Shas, Israel 365. It's a very right-wing, and all they believe in is settlement in Judea and Samaria. It's a Kodesh. Yeah, there are other ones that are Orthodox, but they are not the modern Orthodox.
mhm,
They're Zionists. But the ones that I mentioned earlier, they're not, some of them are not considered even Zionist. It's
mm,
hard to understand, but they're Jewish, but they don't believe in the Zionism as a Zionism. The Haredi Jews or the Orthodox Jews,
mhm.
many of them are not Zionists. They don't
Yeah.
believe in Israel as a Zionist state. They want Israel to be, when the
Yeah.
Messiah comes, it will be the right to have a Jewish state. Until then, we can't have a Jewish state. We'll just live in Eretz Israel, which is the land of Israel, but we will not have a secular Jewish state.
Yeah.
It's a sacrilegious for them. So there's a great deal of tension, but yet they are now, even though they don't believe in it, they want a representation in the parliament, in politics. So they are part of the of Knesset, of course, and they are also, which is totally fine because they're citizens, like the Arabs. Arabs are not
Mhm,
Zionists, but the Arab Israelis also part of the Knesset, which is
mhm.
totally fine, because you live in Israel. They're Arab Israelis, they're citizens, pay their dues, and they should have, their own rights, to right to vote and right to be represented. So that's all good. What's not good about the ultra-Orthodox non-Zionists is that they are part of they have slates in the World Zionist Organization, and they're not Zionists. So we believe it's not right.
That doesn't
Uh,
make sense.
yeah, it's not right. It's not right. Um,
So how did that happen?
well, that's a good question. I think it's AZM's, which is the organization, American Zionist Movement, which is they're organizing the campaign, the election. And there needs to be a reason for that. I'm not sure what. I'm guessing, I'm sure. I mean that the slates had to agree to the Zionist agreement contract, so they wanted so they agreed to it. They signed the Zionist contract, but I think it was disingenuous. I think
Yeah, it
it's
doesn't
not
make
really
sense.
true what they believe in and what they preach. It will be contradicting what the agreement to be part of the Zionist organization. So I'm not sure how it happened myself.
So,
Yeah.
and then we have the other slates are reform and conservative here.
Yeah, so Reform and Conservative, Artsa is the Reform, and Merkaz USA is the Conservative. They've been a part of the World Zionist Organization, I think, for several congresses now. I'm not sure how many period terms, but at least the last two, you've had those two slates
Okay, and
represented.
then there's some others.
And then you have the others, Likud. Likud is the government, the Netanyahu's party, and so they also have a couple of slates here in the U.S. ZOA Coalition and Harut North America. Then you have American Forum for Israel, which is a slate affiliated with another party called Israel Beitenu. That Avigdor Lieberman is the head leader. Israel Beitenu is also a member of the Knesset. He was a minister. He's a right-leaning politician. He's a former Soviet Union immigrant to Israel. A very interesting person. That's the slate that is affiliate with his party. And then there is a Tikva. Tikva is affiliated with the New Democratic Party. A new Democratic Party in Israel was formed by two parties, Meretz and the Labor, the historic Labor Party that used to be a very big party, the largest party. Ben-Gurion was the part of the Labor Party, then Peres was part of it, and Ehud Barak, and many others, Rabin, of course. And then it shrunk a great deal, and almost completely closed. I mean, like completely lost its place in the Knesset. And so now the new leader, Yair Golan, was able to form a new party, the Democratic Party, that basically joined forces between Labor and Meretz, which Meretz is another Zionist left party. So two of them are Zionist, left Zionist parties, and that's a Tikva. Tikva is affiliated with them, and a Tikva was also Slate was also in the last Congress.
Now, when we hear left here, we think a lot about what's going on as far as the Palestinian movement and so on and so forth. Do the Israeli Arabs get involved in that regard?
The Arab Israelis they tend to be on the left side of the political spectrum in Israel. They have their own parties, a lot of them. Some of the Arab, actually, there's some Arab representation in Meretz and the Labor in the past. In terms of the Palestinian movement that we see here, it's not seen in Israel as much as I know. I haven't seen. It's different in Israel. They're not in Israel. They're Arab, and it's shown. After October 7th, I believe Hamas thought they were hoping that the Arab Israelis would actually go and join forces with them and start rebelling and starting intifada within Israel. And they found out that they were disappointed because the Arab Israelis didn't do it.
Yeah.
And it shows a lot that Arab Israelis actually have a lot to lose. And they know that they have it very well. I mean, I'm not saying it's perfect. Comparatively into what the Arabs in other countries, Arab neighbors countries, compared to, of course, the Palestinians. They have freedom, they have democracy, and they have, they're free to vote and they have a overall good life, good wealth.
So now let's get into a coalition. That is what you are representing. And first, talk about slate number 14. What does that mean to folks who are trying to vote?
That's just the way that the slate 14 is just the way that the AZM, when they list everyone, all the slates, it just randomly arbitrary chose us to be slate 14. So doesn't mean anything else besides that. But we are AID coalition. That's American Israel Democracy, which AID AID coalition. We are a newly formed coalition. We were formed in for 2023. We had a different kind of organization organically formed to help the anti-government coalition of forces in Israel that were trying to stop the judicial overhaul in Israel. So that was a very important part of the work that they were doing before the Eighth Coalition was formed. And it was proven to be incredibly, critically important because the efforts that were made during that time really resulted in stopping the government from making some of those critical changes, such as it would have actually made Israel into dictatorship. So it was a very critical time. So that was really important work. Leading to October 7th, that was the work when October 7th happened, 2023. Our group mobilized money right away, right amount of funds towards supporting the soldiers in the battleground in Gaza to provide them with clothing and anything relating to clothing. They didn't have enough underwear, kind of stuff, but really essential because the army was not prepared all the way to have all the supply chain available to the soldiers. It was quite, in some ways, by surprise in that sense, in terms of the logistics, at least. Not that the army didn't do a good job, of course, that did, but there was the work that needed to be done. So the Eighth Coalition at that time was formed, started to really mobilize funds, mobilize equipment, a lot of gear towards the soldiers, but also to those who were evacuated from the areas that were impacted, the areas were attacked. For example, there was a group, Nachal Oz, is kibbutz, that had to evacuate in October 8th. Right. They moved to Tel Aviv. In Tel Aviv, there was a developer that just finished building a new building, and so he let them stay in his building, but there was no furniture. Eighth Coalition mobilized their funds right away to fund all the furnishing of all these apartments for the members of that kibbutz. We're talking about 300 or so. So therefore, they were able to move to furnished apartments in Tel Aviv. Made a huge difference. Otherwise, they would have to be moving from one place to another, not place for their children, decent living situation. So that's the kind of stuff that Eighth Coalition made happen right away, moved money, moved resources to help Israel. And that's what Israel is really strong about. That's the strength of the Jews. We help each other and we do it and when we need to. And that's what keeps us together.
Mazel tov. Your organization is nonpartisan and non-denominational and made up of these types of people. Talk about that.
We are a very diverse group. People come from technology companies, startup companies, or other successful entrepreneurs. We also have educators. We have scientists. We have professors, doctor, MD, and also CEO of a biotech company. Someone like myself who comes from a healthcare industry, but also has a lot of experience with evaluation, program evaluation, accountability, and so forth, education. Different kind of individuals. So a very diverse, large percent of women. We come from all walks of life.
What is your vision and what are you trying to accomplish?
The reason we decided to be in the World Zionist Congress is we see the need for holding the World Zionist Organization accountable for the funding allocation and the appointment of individuals to key positions in those departments, in those organizations that are being funded by the World Zionist Organization, such as the ones we mentioned, JNF and the Jewish Agency and the Settlement Department and so forth. We felt for a group like us who are non-partisan, who are not affiliated with any of the parties and not affiliated with any of the denominations, to really come in from our Israeli background. Some of us have been in elite units in IDF or have been in Israeli companies creating all kinds of innovation in Israel and outside of Israel, representing Israel in all kinds of fields. We feel the importance of having our voice to ensure that we can move the World Zionist Organization to become more accountable, more transparent in its function, in the way it allocates its funds, the individuals who have been appointed to key positions in those organizations. We want those people to be appointed based on merit, based on background, based on ability, skills, rather than based on their political affiliation or loyalty to a particular party, which is somewhat what's happening currently. We're seeing it back from last Congress. There have been a majority of ultra-right or right coalition within the World Zionist Congress. Likud had a big, Netanyahu's people have had a great deal of power. And so they were able to appoint their own loyal members to key positions, one of which was the son of Aryeh Deri, who is the head of Shas. Shas is one of those parties that we saw before. His son, Yankee Deri, he heads one of the departments. He gets paid, he allocates funds. Another person who is also affiliated with that alt-right is Greenwald, who heads the settlement department. And he also makes some decisions of where the money goes. And of course, he puts a lot of that money towards settlement in the Judea and Samaria, not settlement in mainstream Israel, not developing Israel, but actually goes, a lot of those funds go to developing new settlements, not even to help current existing infrastructure like in Ariel or in Gush Etzion, the ones I mentioned before that are in agreement, but actually to create new places. And that's wrong. And that's also not within the consensus of the majority of Israeli people. And so we feel the importance of making sure that we represent the majority of the Israeli people, the Jewish people, in the sense that we want the funds to go to where most of the Jewish people would agree the money should go towards. And that's basically number one priority is rebuilding the destroyed North and South. If you ask most of the Jewish people in the world, they will say, yes, that's where we want to put our money. Number one, anyone who asks, the question here, they say, yes, for sure, that's where the money goes. And guess what? We are the only slate that puts it as number one priority on our slate on our website. I did the research and I found only the conservative slate put it somewhere, but not even number one. It was somewhere kind of buried. We are the only ones that put rebuilding the destroyed North and South as the really important number one priority for us. Number two priority is accountability and transparency. No other slate really emphasize this part. And that to show you why we're important. We're very focused. We're sharply focused on our vision and we walk the walk, not just talk the talk. That's who we are. That's why we need to be in that Congress to really make the reforms happen.
What are your efforts to build community between Israelis and Americans?
Our efforts is to, first of all, make sure that funds will go towards and allocated towards programs that support mainstream Jewish programs here, like the summer camps, like JCA and other camps that are really for the majority of the Jewish people. Make sure that those camps have funds will subsidize Jewish families who may not be able to afford a full tuition. It's crucial. I know how it is because I had 3 boys. Important is how difficult it is when you have to pay, back in the days, with $3,000, $4,000 per kid per camp. And this was a lot of money. So I want the subsidies to happen. I know we've done it in the past. We were fortunate to also have some subsidies when we had our little kids. And I want this to continue. I think that's a huge value, especially as we're trying to reconnect Jewish people. We know we have a lot of mixed marriage. We know that we have a new generation. Look, the majority of them are actually marrying someone who's not Jewish, and that's a fact. And that's just the way it goes. It's part of society. What we need to do, we can't prevent it. Of course, people will do whatever they want to do, and that's totally fine. What we need to do is to do our best to connect into Jewish culture in the best way. And that's usually through Jewish camp, Jewish education, fun of Jewish experience. And that's where we want to spend our money towards. And also to ensure that funds for education, when it comes to education in Israel, will also go to connect communities with the US. So for example, right now, there is a really interesting partnership between the Shar Negev, where I grew up, and San Diego Jewish community. And so that's a really nice teacher-to-teacher kind of relationship development, and they see each other, they go to visit one another, and the Jewish Federation actually supports it, and so it's wonderful. Jewish Agency supports it. Again, Jewish Agency is part of the World Zionist Organization. What we want to happen is to make sure that this kind of program will be expanded throughout the country, perhaps even throughout the world, as much as we can, to really grow the Jewish connection between Israel and the diaspora, to see more and more of those kind of programs. So that's what I would say in terms of connection between Jews around the world and Israel. Of course, also the trips like Birthright and so forth are really critical. So having more of that kind of programs and March of the Living, all those things are critical. So we're not the only ones who fund it. Of course, there are many others. Collaborating with those other organizations will be really important for years to come.
What's reviving the vigor and pride of Israel's educational system? What's that about?
Israeli education right now is in a big crisis. We've seen it. It's not new. It's been going on for many years. And part of the reason why it's been going on is the teacher salary haven't grown much and there's been inflation. That was a big part of the problem. There's also other things that became less of an honorable role, other honorable profession in Israel, unfortunately, over the years when the technology became such a popular thing. So, they say startup companies in Israel, and if you have the aptitude and you can be in technology, you can make much more money in technology than in being a teacher. And being a teacher is tough in Israel. Israelis, the kids are not easy to teach. It's they ask questions, but also they have the chutzpah. They don't have sometimes the mannerisms.
Well, the nation of PTSD,
Yeah, that is true.
It has to come out somewhere.
It does. Yeah, it's true. And so being a teacher is not easy. Some of my family members who are teachers, and I hear it from them. So that's part of it. Going back to COVID, of course, was a global problem with all the educators where they really suffered big time. And so that was the beginning. And then October 7th really created such a huge crisis because you had hundreds and thousands of individuals, Israelis, who had to relocate to different areas. And so that meant their school was no longer a part of their life. The teachers were not available a lot of times. Also, the teachers had to move to a different place. It was not organized. And so a lot of it happened at the moment as needed, but it was not well organized, not systematically. So we've had that situation. In addition to it, also, we've had funding cuts as a result of the war. And in addition to it, we've also seen a lot of the teachers had to be drafted because they're reservists. They in the reserves age. So Israel had a shortage of teachers, all of which really made the education system much more difficult. And really, there was a huge disruption. So what we say is reviving Israel's pride is the education system. Israel was the whole technology piece is due to the education system. When we're talking about reviving, we want to make sure that, first of all, we build the infrastructure. I have a background in educational administration. I got my PhD in educational leadership and organizations. I worked in it for several years. I don't do this work now, but I do have the background, and I do feel the importance of really spending great deal of planning, great deal of allocation of funds and resources towards really rebuilding the infrastructure for teachers, for schools in the different areas in the north and south again, and also in the center, in the peripheries, in Gush Etzion as well, and anywhere else, to really make sure that we have a good system. And that includes also Jewish education as part of it, Jewish traditions, learning the Bible, learning Torah, learning the parashot, and all those things are also incredibly important. It's part of who we are, and we need to be proud of it. And I want all kids to be exposed to it. Also, the stories from the Bible, all the stories from King David, King Solomon. Those are the stories. And if you are in Israel and you learn, it becomes part of who you are because you can actually go. That's what we did as kids. We go a tour. We see actually where things happen. It makes it alive.
The last part of what you're looking to accomplish, it talks about assimilating the ultra-Orthodox and Arab populations to become contributing. Can you briefly talk about that? We're running out of time and there's so much to talk about.
Yeah, assimilating the Orthodox and Arab population. So let's start with the ultra-Orthodox. Ultra-Orthodox, again, the Harari population, they're currently, majority of them, not all of them, majority of them are not being drafted to the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. They go to yeshiva schools, and that's where they go, and they get exam. We feel, and the majority of Israel feel the importance of them to also be drafted to the IDF, be part of the IDF, or at least if not IDF, then community service. So those are the things that are important for us. I think it's the important, and that's going to help them also. Assimilation of them means also they get to be more exposed to professional careers, growth in terms of careers, and being self-sufficient. Currently, a lot of them are poor because they don't become professionals. They don't gain a profession. They stay in yeshiva, and that's one. And then the Arab population, we really want to continue to make sure that Arab Israelis also are doing, in addition to rights, they also do the duty. We want them to contribute to society. We feel the need for them to contribute. And that means not necessarily go to the army because that's a sensitive issue for many of them, but there is other things they can do, such as community service and so forth. And so I think it's important, they're part of society, and I want them to be also bearing more of the weight.
So you've got 110 projects, is that that correct?
Yes, either currently or we did fund in the past, in the last year and a half or so, and that's before, since October 7th. That's showing you the amount of money, which is all money that came from individual donors, and all those individual donors are part of our slate. They're not outside of our slate, at least the major ones.
You've listed quite a number of different organizations that have been involved.
There's a lot of them, and you can see there are many everywhere. Everywhere between north and south. There's a lot of different type of organizations.
Maybe you can, but just some of us who don't recognize it. If you want to talk about a couple of them.
It's an area where a lot of Mizrahi Sephardic Jews live. Traditionally, and it had a huge impact on its population. They attacked. So Hostel of Hakim really helps. What it's doing, it's sort of like it's a behavioral health, mental health type program. Provide support to the families, to individuals who've experienced trauma, helping them with therapy. It's a therapeutic kind of program. And it's through Ben Gurion University. The Ben Gurion University is in the Negev, in the Beersheva. And so Hostel of Hakim is kind of working, is a program that is in collaboration with Ben Gurion University. It's students, and it's students who are part of the social worker program. So that's an example of one of those. Kind of give you an idea. Talk about delegates. Yeah, so delegates we have a very interesting, rich, diverse group of delegates. But if I'm talking about the top 5 delegates, we have it really represents individuals who have had a great deal of success in their own careers, and either already retired or are still working in a career, and have made a commitment to support Israel and provide support to the Jewish community here, to different programs, some of them to give voice to women, some of them through all kinds of programs like the ones we just mentioned, and so forth, and really helping different types of programs. If you go Jonathan, for example, Jonathan Barsadeh, who's the one on the left, he's the chair of our group. And so Jonathan is also, he sits on the Israel Aid. Israel Aid is a group, it's organization based in Israel, that's kind of like the US Aid used to be, where what it does, it does exactly the same as USAID used to do, where it helps support any kind of natural disaster around the world. It has nothing to do with Judaism or not. It's, for example, there was an earthquake in Turkey. Turkey is not a great friendly country to Israel, as we know. Doesn't matter. Israel was there. Israel was there to support, to help the population in the Philippines, in Haiti, and all kinds of places.
Right.
In the U.S., when it was in Miami, we had this issue in Miami, the disaster where that building collapsed. They were there. Interesting, kind of. He's part of it too. He does all kinds of good work in that sense. So I thought it would be good to really show them, because they're really, I truly believe they are really important, really unique individuals. And then
I think you kind of covered your pillars through talking about the different projects that you do. And
Okay. And one thing I want to mention is we really want to form a broad coalition. So when I'm talking about the ultra-Orthodox groups, I'm not criticizing the actual individuals or families who are ultra-Orthodox. I have nothing against them. I love them. They're my brothers and sisters. I see them as such. I don't have any problem with that. I don't have any animosity against whoever has different opinion than mine, if it's on the right or left, whatnot, as long as they want to live in peace and coexistence.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to do. We want, in the Congress, we plan to build as broad as possible coalition to really help those Jews everywhere. This is our cause. We don't want to deal with all the small political gain, but what we want to really focus is on the support to the people at the end, the vision we have.
In your information, you have a comparison between Aid Coalition versus IAC?
Yeah, so IAC is another organization that is in some ways similar to ours because it's really representing Israeli Americans. IC is a very big organization here, larger than our organization, has a long history, formed back in early 21st century, done a lot of good work around the country, and I really appreciate what IC has done. The difference between us and IC Slate for the World Zionist Congress versus us, we are much more focused on recovery of North and South and transparency and accountability in the World Zionist Organization, institutions, and so forth. This is not something that you see in their material, in the documents.
Yeah. As far as voting, because we're going to get into a little bit more of what's been going on, does anyone verify people's qualifications to vote when people are voting?
I think there is an verification. I think by definition, it's an honor system.
Yeah, well. The two things don't go together. It's an honor system for how many billions of dollars? I don't know. It sounds very strange to me.
Yeah. So that's we need to reform the process, and I think that's what we will work on. I'm committed to doing it in the next election.
And obviously, we've talked about wanting people to go out and vote. How do they do that? Everything's online? Mail?
Right now, it's mostly online, and that's part of the problem. I just had today, fortunate situation. Someone who tried everything she could. She lives in Seattle, and I didn't even know the person, but someone connected me with her, and she was trying to vote. And she got the rejection from the system, and she finally gave up. And I said, let me see if I can help you. But, that's part of the problem. I mean, we have a system that doesn't work well online, and there's a lot of fraud related to it. It's just not working, and we definitely need to change it.
This information has been reported throughout much of the media with concerns about the election by places like the Times of Israel, the Jewish Chronicle. It seems like all the papers are reporting about the fraud that they found or potential fraud. Today, again, I got a lot of articles came in. There was at the beginning of the month, there was voter fraud that they found. They had to throw out all kinds of suspicious votes, like now they're suspicious of 2,000 more. And this article said that more than 10,000 votes were at risk of being tossed. So it's a real serious situation going on.
And I'm guessing it's just the tip of the iceberg.
I've listed several of the reports for your comments, please.
Conservative movement, hiring conservative movement Jewish officials sought to recruit religious journalists to discourage Haredi from voting. Wow. Khazalami was accused of distributing posters discouraging Haredi voting participation, accused of offering payments to secure rabbinic endorsements of its campaign, apparently aimed at the voting base of the Eretz HaKodesh state, both in Israel and the U.S. The group is also accused of offering payments. Audits are continuing and opening for new allegations.
So anyway, basically, there's a lot of coming out, and it's pretty sad. And
yeah, it doesn't bode well for us. That's for sure. No. We need to really do a soul searching here and figure out how to move forward as the World Zionist Organization.
Yom Ha'atzmaut is coming up, and again, given what I usually work on, I can't name one without the other about the fact that Palestinians, when we celebrate the creation of Israel and the Jewish people back in their homeland, Israel independence is actually something that causes great grief to Palestinians, and they call it the Nakba, the catastrophe. So
yes, of course. I understand.
Of course, October 7th was horrific, and ramifications still are. And you had shared that you had lost folks. I'm very sorry about that. Are these friends, relatives?
Friends. Rory was my youth leader when I was a teenager. Yeah, very nice person.
And then still have the hostages, and I just was reading today that they think there's only 29 that are still alive.
Yeah, it's so sad. It's so sad. It's tragic, really tragic.
So now let's go from something so sad to something that you're saying is the future is bright. Tell us about it.
So, first of all, I want to say I'm really proud to see that my kibbutz, I grew up in Kibbutz Ruchama in the south. My kibbutz is hosting Kibbutz Kfar Aza and built some homes for them. temporary buildings, house them in those buildings until Faza has been rebuilt. That's just really heartwarming for me. Also because my friends Ram and Lily from Kfar Saba, so it's really wonderful to see that. Future is bright because the spirit is so high, and there is so much what's called biyacha, the togetherness, the oneness is still there, even though there's always going to be argument and debate. But at the end of the day, we see everyone come together and helping each other, and that's what's so beautiful. That's what I want to see more of. Of course, there's now more and more tension also, but that's part of the political turmoil in Israel. But aside from it, you still see that kind of spirit, which is wonderful. I see, just to say a few words, the work that I'm doing now for the 8th Coalition, regardless what happens on May the 4th, be with you. Sorry, I had to say that, end of the elections. I'm sure I will continue to work. I'm committed to doing the work I'm doing now. I just started. It woke me up, and I'm now ready to really move forward. And I will continue to be like a watchdog and be really checking on and really trying to also doing my best to lead as much as I have access to it, lead and make things happen in the World Zionist Congress in years to come, and ensure that the World Zionist Congress is really reflective of the Jewish people and is connected to the Jewish people, regardless of who they are, where they are, and what they do, if they're Haredi or religious or secular or mixed marriage, or what doesn't matter. They're all Jewish, and we need to take care of we need to really accept them, who they are, and make sure that they feel Israel is their home. And the Jewish tent is large enough for all of them.
Well, I would say kol hakavod to you and your efforts. And hopefully this situation, the war, the hostages will come home and war will end, and you can work in peace.
Amen. Let's hope so for both of us. You'll do your work. You're doing really important work here, and I know it's important. The pieces you bring through this podcast, the podcast, and all that stuff that you're doing is really, really key.
I love it. The people I get to meet, oh my God, they're so great.
Thank you, and may you live in peace, shalom, and salam.